Welcome to Capoeira in Canada. This is a podcast about Capoeira in Canada. It's quite simple. First series here is to talk to all those capoeiristas who are running academies across Canada. And today we have with us Professor Saci, Grupo Capoeira Camará. Welcome, Saci. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and taking your time to tell us a lot about yourself, basically. So,
Gladly, my friend.
this is very exciting because it's it's interesting. This project came out of a couple of little catalysts on my end. I had another friend of mine who we've been talking about starting a podcast for a very long time, and we started recording some stuff, and it was basically on the premise that we had some really great conversations that turned into really deep conversations, after some ramblings about various topics, and we decided, we should record this and create a podcast. But then I started thinking some more about a few other scenarios that have happened in the past. One in particular was one of my latest students last year, who was, when he discovered that Capoeira was here in Brampton, he was very excited. He was like, I didn't know there was any Capoeira outside of Toronto. So my goal here is to have these interviews and talk to the teachers. They can tell their story, and we can get more information out there so people can discover about Capoeira, more about what's available to them, and they can take a moment and listen to you and who you are, and hopefully people will come, and hopefully this will inspire more people to come to the academies, and let's raise more awareness of the availability of Capoeira across Canada. So I want to start with the history of Professor Saci. When did you get started in Capoeira? Where and how? How old were you? Tell us your story.
All right, cool. Well, first of all, again, thanks again, Pei, for having me here. It's an honor. I think what you're trying to do is an amazing thing. It's genuinely philanthropic. I think it's nice to see that people are looking out for Capoeira as a whole, as opposed to just local squads. So that's amazing. So again, on behalf of anybody who's watching this, I'm sure on behalf of all the leaders around the world that do Capoeira, thank you, and people like you who are actually really trying to get the word out in a genuine nature. So for myself, long stories with martial arts. So I guess myself, I've been doing martial arts since I was 16. I had cross-trained in Aikido when I was in high school, and also wrestled. And then once I was in university, I was trying to find a continuation of Aikido. Unfortunately, I went to UWO, and unfortunately, it didn't have any Aikido, but they did have this thing called Hapkido, which I had no clue what the hell it was. Mm-hmm. Sounded cool. Decided to try it. They had black keys.
It had Aikido in its name and black keys. Yeah.
Oh, Aikido, black keys. I'm in. No problem. I got you. No clue what the hell Aikido is. Then I walk in and I realize what it actually is, and the concept of being a nice cross between Taekwondo and Aikido and the movements, and I just fell in love with it. And so I single tasked that martial art for a number of years. Where after X amount of years, I was able to actually receive my black belt while I was in university, which is great. Now, during university, I also, almost all my friends, I hung with a group of Caribbean folks and people who are Canadian. And I don't know why, after a year of knowing everybody, we started to realize that we were all martial artists in our own right. Some people did Wing Chun, some people did Kempo Karate, and some people did Muay Thai. So we all started really realizing that our bond really was a bond of martial artists. So we would spend weekends after weekend grabbing VHS tapes, and yes, I'm dating myself, VHS tapes from wherever we could find, put them in the VCR, play them, eat, laugh, start, kicking each other's asses because you see really cool moves, and then also helping each other to cross-train, right? So eventually each one of us would also cross-train back and forth with the martial arts. So during university, I'd also cross-train in Kempo Karate. I actually did that for 2 or 3 years. Muay Thai, did that for 2 or 3 years. And this is all during the time of being in university. So it was a great martial art experience that I had during those years I was there. Now, one of the tapes that we watched while we were in university was this really cool tape of these people, a lot of these guys, shirts off, kicking and flipping to music. And it was so neat. So, of course, we start trying to break our necks, kicking and flipping like them. No clue what the hell it is, but it was really cool to see. Well, fast forward, university's over. I'm back in Toronto. I was living in Mississauga at the time, and I'm trying to find something. Hapkido, I've already got the black belt, but I've got nowhere to train. My Master Sang Kim, my master in London, Ontario, is in London, so I don't know really where to train in Toronto. There's no local academies. So I dropped martial arts in its entirety, looking around for something. As I go to this one gym, I see someone moving around in a very familiar manner, and I start talking to him. And he says, "Hey, you know what? I just started a Capoeira academy, Capoeira school, just down the street." Okay, I'm in, no problem. It looks cool. I don't realize necessarily that's the same tape I watched at that time, but hey, I go and I join it. Me and a couple of our friends from university and a couple of friends that I had here, we all join up, and therefore we start. And that's around 1998. So we end up training there for a little while. And after a couple of years of training there, he was actually a student from Asha Capoeira. He brought down Monsieur Bahan from Asha Capoeira, Asha Capoeira, and his students to do a workshop. Well, when Mestre came down and saw how many students he had, he saw that it was a great opportunity for that group to develop a structured, firm group. The person who was teaching me was at the time only a second Kolda. So he said, you know what, obviously Toronto's a big city. There's not a lot of capoeira in the city at this point. I'm going to send you my best student. And at that point, he brought down at the time, who was a Professor Bola, who is now my Mestre Bola. And so he sent him down to Toronto. After probably around 4 to 6 months of Bola being in the city, he started his first class, and I was in his first class with a couple of my fellow veterans that have been around now for the last 20 years. So for myself, I've been doing capoeira for the last 22 years at this point, I guess, 22, 23 years, and still going strong.
Awesome.
So that's basically how I walked into capoeira. I literally fell into it without knowing it. And a funny story, going back, that video that we were watching in university was a video of Mestre Bola and Asha Capoeira. We ended up seeing that video like literally 10 years later, and I was going, my mind was blown. I did not know that Mestre had actually planted a seed of me to join that group at that point. It happened to be the same person. I saw this big guy doing these flips. I said, oh, this is going to be awesome. I want to see if I can do it like him one day. And now he's actually my Mestre, which is, again, very odd, just how things work out.
Cool. Right on. Tell us about the history of Grupo Capoeira Camará, and when did it get started? Because you had mentioned you'd started with Grupo Ashe, and now you're known under the banner of Capoeira Camará. How did that come to be? And the story of it.
Okay, so as I mentioned previously, Mestre Bola had started under Ashe Capoeira. He was his top student. He was Mr. Bahan's top student. And at the time, while he was in Toronto, he was really starting to come onto his own. And I think that's something that happens to a lot of capoeiristas when the Professor Contra Mestre at the time, he was moved to Contra Mestre. And they start to realize their fundamental systems. And very similar to, I love my mother. When I was under her roof, there were certain things that I learned from her in terms of how to apply to my life and to my home. Hits a point where I'm at a certain age where I realize, you know what, I'd also like to see if I can now grow onto my own, using the base of what I've learned in that home with my mom, and then now into my home. And then you move out. And that's really and truly organically how it happened with Mestre Bola. He, as a Contra Mestre, he was able to understand that he'd like to start his own system that has a fundamental core of where Ashe came from, but now being able to add and adapt and be a little more fluid with the things that he's learned in, at the time, almost 15, 20 yeyears of capoeira that he had under his belt. So he decided to start off on his own, and half of us went with him. The other half stayed with Asha Capoeira. Still had a great bond with our teammates that were in Toronto at the time. And then it started. So it started with us having no name. And one of the things I remember sitting on many different phone calls with Mestre Ebola, and we were, with some veterans, we were trying to figure out a name. And, sometimes we'd sit there and try to figure things out. What does this mean? What's this mean? But one of the things we realized in the city is that around the world, capoeira was a little fragmented at the time. Not a little, quite a bit. Whereas groups were really about trying to show which group is stronger than the other. I go back to those kung fu flicks I used to watch back in the day. I know my school's better than your school, then the schools fight. Well, we realized at some point.
You and I can joke about this because in 2003, when I got started, like that era, like 2003 to 2009, I think is that period, right? Or well, maybe not all the way to 2009 because things shifted in between there, but probably till about 2006. And I remember, we would come to Hodas, and I'd see you, and we'd see each other at the different, academy shirt time, and we'd be like, there'd be that.
Oh yeah, I'm like, he's a big guy. Let's go. That's how it was. Right? And the thing was, is that's how a lot of people were trained that way. It was, you have to train to make sure you're the toughest capoeirista. And I think we'll be talking about it later on, but the definition, at least to myself, and I think to a lot of my peers, has really changed in terms of what capoeira should be about. But when we were trying to figure out the name of our group, we realized, let's be the antithesis of what we're seeing. If we wear it on our shirts, we have to represent it. So we realized, Camara, be comrades. Well, I'm not trying to be everyone's friend. We're not trying to be everyone's buddy. We're not trying to do anything. We're just trying to understand we're all comrades in the same art. Doesn't matter what logo you wear, that's your system. What logo I wear is my system. We can go there. We can have great games. They can have games even. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we shake hands. We go for a beer because we're comrades. Camara. And that's really where it came about. We were trying to figure out different names, and then at some point Messi just said, guys, Camara. And then we just started talking about it, and it just sat well. And then we started realizing, again, that seed's been planted for so long. In every Ladaia, it starts with talking about Camara, right? It's in almost every song out there for a reason, because that seems to be a fundamental part of what a lot of these songs are really trying to promote. So that's really how the name came about, and how the group started, and eventually the logo, you'll see that on the arm, we've got the person doing the martelo cruzado, in fact, and that's actually Professor Curioso. So we took some screenshots of him actually doing the kick.
Nice.
Then added some extra muscle to him. added some extra beef to him.
I'll let you guys sort that out later.
Logo, but he always says, oh yeah, don't worry. He knows he's on all of our arms, all of our shirts, all of our backs. So he gets that credit. So no, that was really cool. So it's the group. It's really neat to actually be part of a group where we know, not as students, we also are represented in the art. And there's something that's just magical about being part of the beginning of a system and then being part of the evolution of a capoeira system. And that's what I think is really cool.
Nice. Cool. Now, you didn't, I should say, I don't know if this question really it quite applies, but we'll go with it anyways. Like, sure. Why did you start teaching? Let's go from there. What drew you to teaching? Because not everyone takes that choice, despite, we know like many capoeiristas, some capoeiristas, well, not many, but some capoeiristas, even though as they evolve and as they grow and as they're awarded higher chords, and if they if they're awarded a chord with title like instructor or higher or whatever, and down the road, not all of them usually take on running an academy, and even not all of them take on the role or take on teaching on a regular basis. And this is something you've done, since I've known you and as you grew, you've been a staple or cornerstone of Grupo Camara. And at some point, for those who know, Mesebola is not permanently in Toronto anymore. He hasn't been here for some time now, right? And it's the group's kind of been in your hands. So tell us a bit about that. How come, what was the choice, or did you have a choice?
That second part's a good question too, because some people don't, right? No, but I guess as you mentioned, Messi hasn't been a permanent resident of Toronto for a number of years now. Camara has been around now for 15 plus years. Again, Messi has been I've been training under him for the last 21, and 5 years in to us being and forming the group Capoeira Camará. Within those first 5 years, when Messi started on his own, we were in Toronto with a group of his students. Were Toronto students, and Messi was very, very straight up about the concept that he wants to be around people he can trust. He wants to be around people that understand him and that want to train with him, understand his system. And just, in essence, we can train today, go and check out a movie tomorrow. So what happened, though, was that there were a number of different people, different low-level, high-level capoeiristas from around the world who actually said, Messi, we want to join you. We want to train under your system. He said, no. It's nice. I'm glad. Thank you. Humble. But hold the fort for now. Well, after receiving so many requests, he realizes that, you know what, if people want to, how do we do it? And again, it's part of the organic nature of growing into a group. So what occurred was that he basically said, you know what, I have to get to know you first. Very similar to what we're mentioning is he between myself, Professor Curioso, some of the other veterans that were in the city, he knew us very well, and there's a comfort level to being open and training with that. I would believe with martial arts, the analogy of we all take our shirts off and train. We all go down and wear all whites. It's not hiding much, and it's the same concept, right? Those you train with, you really need to be able to trust. So just bringing somebody into a system, you have to make sure they understand you understand them, expectations are there. So over the course of 5 years, Messi would start to travel here and there, start to give people the opportunity to get to know him, his style. It gave him up some time to get to know them as well. Over those 5 years, we started to grow. So he started to accept students from around the world as Camara. So we'd go to, people in Russia. We had one of my peers, one of the people that I started Capoeira with, Professor Emil Kilo. He was already in Bermuda. So he was already, he came over to Camara as well. We had have people, eventually Professor Curioso moved to Ireland. We had people around the planet that eventually said, hey, you know what? We want to join Camara, and Messi had to start to travel there. Well, when he would travel, we would take on the class and teach. So many times I'd be the one that was still in class. Class was starting to actually atrophy at the time. And so it was a little difficult to actually keep the class going because we were really trying to keep that momentum there. We eventually got our own academy by Lansdowne and Bloor. That really did help to have a central location. But at the same time, that's when he was growing. So I ended up teaching quite a few of the classes when he was away. Just by an organic nature, I'm there. I was one of the top students. I would teach a class. Fast forward a number of years. Next thing you know, we have upwards of 17, 18 groups around the planet. Amazing. And I call Messi Bola the reluctant leader. It's not the fact that he didn't want to be a leader. It's more the fact that we had no desire to grow the group. We were very comfortable. I know Messi was very comfortable with having just a group in Toronto. Yeah. We had people like Messi Sebia. We had people like Messi Tabara. We had people like Messi Preguiça, who were helping to mentor us into forming our own. Now having to bring on other capoeiristas, what are we bringing them into? We have to bring them into a system. What's our system? We're still trying to figure that all out. So it was very difficult at the time for Messi to juggle that. And then while we're trying to also determine our system here in Toronto at the same time. Well, now fast forward a number of years. He's now on the road all the time because we have too many groups. In order to ensure that the system of Capoeira Camará is being taught properly, he has to physically be there to teach. He has to go and do a workshop here, batizado there.
Check in on everybody,
became
right?
An international job. Checking on everybody. So part of what I wanted to make sure he knew is that you can check in on everybody else. When you're back home, you're back home. And I'll keep this going while you're gone. And it wasn't done in this is now your class. It was done as I will keep it running as much as I can with the peers and with our teammates that we have here. But then when we realized it was going to be a permanent situation, where our group was not getting smaller, it was actually getting larger. And again, it's based on the amazing work of Mestre Bola. He's the way he teaches and his style and the system. It was very easy for him to really, not, I don't want to say get caught up, but it became a regular national job. I always say now his fixed address is Air Canada. He's always in the air, poor guy. And I don't even understand how he deals with the jet lag, but whatever. But when we realized that, then there was an informal handoff to, you know what? I said, at the end of the day, let me handle this. When you come back to the city, feel free to teach, but let me handle this. But at that point, this is me taking on his students. And there is a different mentality when you're taking on someone else's students versus when a student starts with you. So to go to the example of why I started my class, informally, there was a period of almost 10 years where I was informally the teacher of the class in the city. So 5 years while we turned to Capoeira Camará, Mestre was still in the city. Right. 5 years where if we would leave for a workshop here and there, I would help to teach. 5 years where it almost was a full-time thing, where I was 90% of the time, I was in the city, I was teaching the class, but again, not my students, I'm teaching on behalf of Mestre Bola. Then the last 5 years. For the last 5 years, I realized I want to now feel what that mentality is like to actually have a student start with me as their teacher. As they said, there's one thing about being the uncle and babysitting. There's another thing about actually having your own kids.
Being mom or dad, yeah.
So I need to experience that. And keep in mind this, is that Mestre did such an awesome job at incepting the idea in my head. And the way he did it was he never pressured me to have a class, ever. He never said I had to teach the class. He never said I had to keep doing the class. It's just there. Do what you want. If you want to do it, great. If you don't, it's fine.
If you're comfortable, take on the responsibility, basically, right?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And in reality, what the lesson was if you want to learn more, take on the responsibility. If you want to limit yourself, don't. It's okay. And that actually, I realized after that was really the lesson, right? Yeah. Is falling into it and realizing that there was a desire and a need from my own self to feel what it's like to be a parent in the art, to have my own students, and then go from there. So that's really when I started to try to teach in your location up in Brampton.
Right.
And then I moved to the class in Toronto, started up in there, and that really ended up becoming fairly successful. And then we grew from there. And then over the last 5 years, there was now an official handoff. So Mestre Bola literally said, now the people who used to be my students, they are now your students. The people who are now your students, stay your students, amalgamate the two, and let's go. And in that case, in the last 5 years, we've had tremendous success. However we define it, but we've had tremendous success in terms of a class down here.
Nice. Cool. Excuse me. Now let's dig into perhaps some little more subjective stuff. So this is interesting. We were talking this before we got rolling with the cameras before we got rolling with things. But so this question can be twisted and contorted however you want to. But basically, my initial thought was like, with your time and your experience and your exposure to capoeira and we'll call it, capoeira culture, because it is different. Has, in your mind, do you feel that over the years that there's been an influence of Canadian culture on capoeira, and if so, how? Or can we flip that question around and go from the other way around? Is another way to look at it as well. So, what do you think?
We have, honestly, great question, and we have both. It circles me back to a workshop we did in Bahia with Mestre Sabia years ago, and I remember him. It was the first time I was a monitor at the time, and I went down to Brazil. I am scared out of my mind because it was one of the first times I've ever been to Brazil. I'm a slightly higher quada. I am at the time 220 pounds. I know that I've heard these rumors that the bird's going to come after me. I am scared. And so I'm going there, and it was just an awesome experience. And I remember doing the workshop with Mississippi, and he sits us down and he says a couple of things. And we asked him a very similar question. How do you feel in terms of now, here we are, Canadians coming down to Brazil doing capoeira? And he said, you know what? He's like, it's a pretty awesome thing. He's like, two things have happened. One, a lot of mestres, a lot of capoeiristas, period, in Brazil, were realizing they weren't really being taken seriously in Brazil. It became one of those things where everyone does capoeira. You go to Rio de Janeiro, people are doing capoeira on the streets, and no one was really taking it as seriously as they could. So the ones that really wanted capoeira to grow realized you can't grow in the same pot. To grow, you have to leave. You have to get to a bigger pot, which is the world. And so there's a lot of capoeiristas who have left Brazil, not because they don't like Brazil, but because they love it so much, they want to plant that seed around the planet. And then he's like, but at the same time, the opposite's happened. People from other places on the planet have come to Brazil and planted their seeds. And now you've got this really beautiful forest of a mix of the two cultures. And what both cultures and why it's thriving now are two things. Move out of Brazil, move out of, my background is Canadian Jamaican, so move out of Jamaica. And a lot of those areas have culture. And I say culture, but they have rhythm and art, and it's art and culture is really pushed as the forefront of life. You have to have some feeling. You have to listen to some music. You have to feel this, and you have to move. Well, then the concept of capoeira growing in Brazil makes a lot of sense because it's the ginga, the movement, the music. It in a mix of so many different cultures and feelings and history and this and that. So, of course, capoeiristas, you see a lot of Brazilians, they start it and they get it and they can ginga and they can move. Amazing. So that's what Brazilians have planted around the world, this concept of really cherishing art, where sometimes in North America, if you see someone, and I'll use, nothing against skateboard, because I used to skateboard when I was a kid, but if you see someone who is 40 years old, skateboarding, the first thing that people say is, oh my God, do they have a job?
Yeah, or what's he doing,
who's to say that that's not, or what's he doing with his life?
Yeah.
Who's to say that that art isn't, my sister is a professional dancer, and she spent her entire life trying to prove to the world why dance is no different of a career. My degree is in applied mathematics. I sit at the computer all day. That is revered in North America as a career, whereas a dancer is, that's cute, you're a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she has had amazing success as a dancer. It is a career no different than counting. But what has happened now is that whereas the North Americans and people outside of Brazil have now learned to value art, in Brazil, in capoeira, people outside of North America have now instilled structure. So Mr. Xavier said this. He's like, it's great. He's like, if I have a lineup of my Brazilian students, I can tell them, cool, all right, guys, go up there, do flips, do this, that. They're doing amazing floreios. If I say stand in line, I want to make 5 lines, and I need you to be here on time. They have a hard time doing it. What is a structure thing? No, we should be free like birds. We have to move. Art.
What do you mean?
What do you mean you have to be on time?
Put me on a line or make me get into a grid. Yeah.
Thank you. So one of those things, if you go rewind back to Mestre Bimbo, he was very big on trying to instill structures. The reason why he wrote it down, and he had forms, he had belts, he had this. He was trying to instill something because his students who had traveled the world realize that those places, they're successful because they have structure. So that those students brought structure back to Mestre Bimba, and he tried his best to instill structure in the Brazilian culture. So what has happened now, fast forward to 2021, is capoeira has become this thing where we embrace the art, but now Brazilians are embracing the structure that we have now helped to bring.
Right. And it's going back to another conversation I had with Professor Helio. Now the challenge is, I think for a lot of capoeiristas is recognizing when it's time for structure and when it's time to be free like a bird when you're at class, right? There,
Exactly.
and that's a big challenge for a lot of people, I think, because um, he made an interesting point about an analogy to a situation he ran into with one of his students, and it was the student kept coming, showing up late and whatever, and then he was like, hey, well, why aren't you showing up on time? And he's like, well, it's kind of like, it's my malandrage, right? I just show up when I show up, right? And he's like, but again, not recognizing when structure is required and when malandrage is required in certain situations, right?
Right.
And going deeper into that about recognizing what really malandrage is all about, which is a completely different story. So, um, but yeah, it's a very good point you make, and I think it's about how we've seen that evolution, and I think it's good. And I remember when I first started listening to a lot of recordings of Meste's, like Messe Accordion. We had some DVDs of his from the early 2000s and that, and he was sitting around a table with a few others, and they were talking about how capoeira has evolved since they started, and based on what you talk about and what others have said, like that evolution continues. That evolution continues as long as we are very careful not to wash away the roots and wash away that connection to those deep roots that it has, right? So
That's it. I mean, and you mentioned that. That's I've heard that in the past as well. Is that that's obviously a fear, the concept of now diluting the
right,
purity of what came from Brazil,
yeah,
right? It's a very difficult thing because can you have structure and artistic freedom in the same nature? Even though it's, if you really look at it, capoeira is a lot of structure. It's such, we
mm-hmm,
control our bodies. We have a roda, we have a bateria. Like it comes already, actually, naturally from an African structure
yep,
that, from candomblé, which is extremely structured. And that structure is already inherent within the art, which is why I think that all we've done as North Americans, and I'll say Europeans and people who are non-Brazilian, is fertilized the current existing structure within there. Really hold on to that as something that is familiar to us as we embrace the unfamiliar nature of just being artistic, right? Being free and just singing and not thinking and playing in a hada and, humility, all that stuff that comes along with it, right?
right,
But
cool, cool. Now, for someone who's been running an academy for a while, and you've dealt with, I'm sure, a lot of challenges, like you said, at one point in time, the academy became very, I don't want to say anorexic, but it shrunk. And I think a
yeah.
lot of academies went through a period of that. You know, and with respect to rebuilding or building an academy, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is in a position where they've they've earned themselves or reached a level where they're feeling comfortable enough to start their own academy in another place? What would you tell them?
Um, it's not easy. Keep that in mind. I mean, that's, if there, I have my full-time job and this is so much harder. It really is. But keep in mind that people want to start an academy, don't realize that it's not that you want to start to teach. You have to embrace the fact that you now want to start a business.
Mm.
If you look at it separately, you can have all of the talent in the world. I've known capoeiristas that have more talent in one of their fingers than I have had in my 21 years of training the art. But for all the talent that they're worth, they can't seem to keep an academy or a class going. And so it takes more than just talent. But I've also known people who are extremely structured. They're there, they're on time, they pay their bills, they pay their taxes. But then their class atrophies as well. And back again to the combination of the two. One of the most difficult things is, one, as a teacher, you have to realize and be willing to learn from teaching. If your only job or anything you want to do as a teacher or as an upcoming teacher is to show that you can teach, you've already failed. Because the teaching part of it, students can see this. If you're not teaching for the purpose of learning, then you also don't grow because you're at your limit, you're at your knowledge base, and if your goal is just to disseminate all that knowledge down, that knowledge base isn't increasing.
Right.
The students can see that there's no growth as a teacher, right? And they feel stale. I've known people who have taught classes, watch them atrophy. They go, why? I don't get it. I'm on time and I teach them every day.
Yep.
I try to teach them new things and I go, oh, but are you teaching yourself new things? Have you traveled to workshops? Have you tested your art? Have you tried to bring new things into you to up your level, up your pot of knowledge or desire even, so you have now new things to disseminate down?
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yep.
It's so important. So that's number one. The number two, then on the other side, it's a business, right? Structure it. Make sure it's there. Do not miss class. Be on time. And be on time for class as a teacher isn't the same be on time as a student. Be on class as a teacher is 5, 10, 15 minutes early.
Yeah.
And I say early because that word doesn't apply to a teacher. You're there setting up, getting warm, getting ready. If you walk in class and your students are there, it's amazing. Like one thing again, I'll talk about different things with Mestre Bola and why I've trained with him for so many years. But my gosh, how many times I come to class, I would go to class and he's already there. He's already sweating, right? He's already been getting himself ready. He's on time. He's early. And now I'm walking into his room. It's like walking, I use the analogy of a club in Toronto. Nothing's worse than waiting outside in a line in a club in Toronto, going inside and realizing the DJ's not even there.
Right.
You're going, why did I wait in this damn line in the first place?
Especially in February.
Exactly. For those who are not in cold places, screw you.
Yeah.
But it's true, right? There's a lot of capoeiristas who just excellent, they just don't show up to the class. They show up a little late or they teach on the fly. Students can tell if you just thought of that class today, thought of that class 10 minutes before. If they see that there's structure in terms of being on time, structure in terms of understanding how the payment system works, understanding there's a schedule, understanding that there should be events, understanding you have to give them something to work towards, and then even a structure no different than our North American schools, right? I go back again to Mestre Bimba. It's not a novel, new thing. Mestre Bimba had lessons that he taught depending on what level you were.
Right.
You knew what's coming next.
Yeah.
You knew if you missed something, you missed something. If I missed a university class, I knew I missed a class that could help me move forward. That feeling of the fear of missing out also drives students to come to class.
Yep.
Right? It drives them to not want to miss the next thing. Not just I want to learn something new, but I don't want to miss something that could be crucial to the next lesson next week.
Right. I mean,
Right?
they're building
So
blocks,
that's
right? We got to
structure.
learn how to, 1 + 1, and then we can get our multiplications
That's it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
there's building blocks, and whoever's teaching, whoever's choosing to teach needs to like you made a good point about having lessons plans, putting some thought about what you want your students to learn, not just today, but over the next 2-3 weeks. Mm-hmm. Right? And then being able to build on that so that you can help them grow, show them how to grow, really, because ultimately them growing is at the end of the day, it's all on them, right? It's on their effort and their, when they, are they doing their homework? Are they practicing on their own or whatever? But yeah, when it comes down to running an academy, there's more to it than just standing up in front of people and showing them how to Jenga, right?
Yep, exactly. And you have to take their learning under your responsibility. I'm going to rewind 3 years. Mestre, we'd both be sitting there wondering why are there still some students that can't play the berimbau or can't hold a rhythm on the atabaque. We'd say, go home, practice. Come on, just practice. Well, we all did practice. Then we realized, okay, wait a second. Hold on. Why don't we make sure that is within our class?
Yep.
Why don't we also take responsibility of their learning and make sure we're giving them the tools in class? So we started to have formal music classes at a structured regular time. And I found that really helped. In fact, there's some students that wouldn't show up for the month, but they'd show up for the monthly music class. And it became that we realized that's what their drive is in the art, because there's so many different facets, right? If we talk about the music, the history, the language, the movement, the camaraderie, not everyone's going to be great at the same thing, or not everyone's going to be driven to train by the same thing. So you have to find those things within the academy that is all there for them to want to do it. So back again to your question, so we don't lose focus. In terms of what people need what I would recommend for anyone who wants to teach a class, again, make a plan to grow yourself. Do it for the right reasons because you want to grow yourself, and then make a plan for your upcoming students. And if you're not ready for that, don't do it. You really shouldn't, because it's a very, very difficult thing to do. Up and down. You have one class where you have one student. You have another class where you have a mix of 5 different belt levels. There's its own inherent challenges, right?
Yep.
So you need to be prepared to actually take all those on and not walk away.
Yeah, for sure. Good advice. Absolutely. Why don't you tell us about one of your most memorable or proudest moments at your academy? Has there been, and I'm sure there's many, I mean, we all have moments, right? But is there any one that you always kind of come back to that was like, this was like, it was a huge thing, or something that it was just super memorable, or like left you with at a BIA for days, left you with those goosebumps of like, man, I was so like, so enamored by that moment.
Yeah, easy. So 2 years ago, we were having our batizado, and I was going to leave it a surprise to my students, but I decided to give them a heads up so they wouldn't crap their pants. I let them know that there's one of the workshops, or one of the hadas, has to be led by all the students that are.
I remember this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly.
That was.
I think you were part of that hada too, right?
So yeah.
No, actually, no.
No, it wasn't. It was. I wasn't allowed. Yeah, you kicked us out. It was.
Yep. So my thing, right? My whole big thing is empowerment, right? I like to know, like, if I'm trying to teach my students how to eventually become as good as me and way excel me, I've got to empower them that they have that ability. So I told them, I'm like, guys, this 1 hour hada is only going to be led by you and sung by you, and sung by your peers at exactly the same level. No one higher than 5th called up, for a reason. Because that stage of having to hold a hada for an hour during a massive batizado where Mestre Bola's there, other mestres from around the world are there, other students from, oh my God, they have never practiced so hard in their lives. So
you were very generous in giving them a heads up on that.
Oh yeah, I had to be nice. I realized if I didn't, I think they would have literally crapped their pants right off the bat. But then here's the best part: I didn't give Mestre Bola the heads up on purpose. He knew that there was like a break, and it was actually the break for the teachers to go and have lunch and break and do their thing between the workshops.
Yeah.
So he sees as we're all going on break after last workshop, a hada setting up, and so Mestre's kind of sitting there, walking around, looking, and he's like, "So is there about to be a hada session?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Cool. You want to go and grab something to eat?" He's like, "No, wait. Just what is this?" And I'm like, so I tell him, I'm like, "It's a hada for only 5th call down. He's like, "Oh, okay." So as they're setting up and as they're getting going, I see Mestre Bola pacing behind the hada. I'm like, "Mestre, come on, let's go." He's like, but Saci, and I'm like, "Let's go. Like, we have to let them do this." It was the funniest thing. So I see him reluctantly. I mean, like, literally kicking and screaming. I finally get him outside of the room.
That was an awesome moment for sure. That was.
Oh, it was hilarious. And then but here's the best part. We turn the corner, and we hear the hada start, and it starts beautifully. And of course, the little, I see Messi kind of look back because he's a perfectionist with the music.
Yeah.
And then he stops. And then you could tell everyone kind of got into the rhythm because we're now at the room. The nervousness is down.
Yeah.
And they start singing. And people start clapping. And I hear the ashe just build. Even right now I'm saying it, I'm getting goosebumps. And then Messi turned, and the moment was that look he gave me of, oh, we realized they have it. They've got it. And in that one moment, I mean, if I couldn't have been more proud of the students, and I'm not saying my students because it wasn't just my students.
Oh, was that all
students
the students
from students from Malé, students from Cadara, students from Iquipe, students from Calgary. There's students from all around that helped to join that were now not the advanced students,
right?
The next tier of what we're handing off capoeira to. and they can hold a hada. I mean, it was off the bat, it sounded hype. And that moment to hear that next generation of capoeiristas couldn't be any more proud.
Yeah, that was an awesome moment. And when you were explaining it, a lot of us were just like shaking our heads and laughing, like, "Oh, going to get my coffee. See ya."
Yep. See ya. God, we're not allowed to play here. Bye.
I got told, get out.
Telling people that you're leveling down and all of us, like, sorry advance. I know there's a hada. We're hungry. We gotta go. We gotta go. We have to give them the stage they need to hold it on their own, right? And we'll see if the kids rip up the house. And they didn't, right? They shined it down. We came back. It was still going.
Yeah.
Once we came back, remember, we were all able to come back. We played in their hada, right? They're still holding on the bateria. And I'm sitting there playing and in the hada, and I could feel their ashe, and they're holding it down. And they're passing off the bateria. They're passing off the songs to their peers that are the same level from other groups and other teams. There's just something they got it. They got what we're trying to teach them, right? And that was not my accomplishment. That was the accomplishment of all the teams, all the systems, all the groups that were part of that hada, and we all realized we're doing the right thing. We're on the right path.
For sure. That was it was a good moment, and it was a good teachable as well to remind them. Like, I know Camara. Camara would talk about this a lot too. Like, in our early days, we didn't have a contramesse or a messe in our academy for a while. And when it came to running, rodas at the end of class, I was amarelo, laranja, contramesse Falcão, contramesse Camarão, instructor Esperta. I mean, at that time, they weren't too far ahead of me, right? They were a couple of years on, but there weren't a lot of us. We had to do it ourselves, right? And you had no choice. If we wanted to do it, if we wanted to have a hada, if we wanted to play the game, we had to do it ourselves. You had no choice, right? You had to learn.
And the best part with that is that you've got Mestre Lua, Mestre Bola. They never made us feel like we were subpar, right? They made us feel like, oh yeah, you're doing a good job. And they'd play in the hadas that we're leading. If we were to go back to that point and listen to ourselves, we'd probably say, what the hell? We really weren't that good. But these people, all the mestres that are now leading, they're still leading us. They empowered us back then.
For sure.
And they made us realize we don't have to be, boa voz. We just have to be us. We have to try, make an effort.
Yep.
And that's going to be enough, right? Which is, I think, with the more leaders that we have around the world and with all the different academies, that can sometimes be lost on now the upcoming ranks, right? At what coda do they get that opportunity to feel that amount of empowerment?
Right.
And it really dilutes. It gets less and less and less and less the more that each group grows.
It's especially in one location, right? Especially in one location, if you have a lot of advanced students, those opportunities become fewer. The accessibility of those opportunities become fewer because typically, it'll be the advanced students who will be starting the hada. It'll be the messe, the contramesse, and anybody in the titled lines. They'll be picking up the instruments first to start a hada. What you did was that moment was awesome because you're like, this is on you guys, right? Take it, make it, show us what you got.
Yep. And we all know that first crack at the binimbao and trying to sing that first song is the hardest thing. Right? I think there's been times you've come to my academy. I'm like, here, pay, enjoy.
Oh, man.
Bunga, right? It's not easy, right? It puts you on the spot.
Oh, for sure.
And I had it myself, right? Messi did the same thing to myself. I remember I go back again to me being a monitor again in Brazil. First time I'm down there. At the time I got injured, so I tore my hamstring, so I couldn't even play. And at the time, I'm thinking Messi, Messi says, okay, you know what, Saci, just go down, take everyone down to the city and just have a hada with them. I just go down and have a hada with them. And all I'm thinking is, what the hell, Messi? Like, why are you being so lazy? I don't want to do a hada. What are you talking about? It's me. So at the time, I'm like, I'm not girling down. I'm like, whatever, I'll take them down. I'm thinking Messi's just being lazy. I can't believe this. And So I go down, I start this roda, and next thing you know, there's other Brazilians that I didn't know that were going to show up that show up. And so I'm scared crapless. So I start, oops.
Whoopa.
That's awesome. Uh-oh. Did I lose you?
No, we're good. We're good. Keep going.
Oh, you see me? Okay, cool.
Yeah, all
I
good.
can't see you, but as long as you can see me.
That's all right.
So we start the roda, and roda's cool. I can't play, but other capoeiristas from all around are.
Uh-oh. I think I've lost you. Okay. All right, you're back.
And I'm back. Sorry, I didn't realize that it
That's
was gonna
okay. That's what post
that was gonna
production's
shut
for, to
off.
take
So
care of those little issues.
exactly.
We'll get it taken care
See,
of.
I'm not.
So,
You know what? I'm not using the strings. I usually use all cordless. I
yeah.
put this on.
You got all excited and bah!
Exactly.
It's all good. It's all good. So you're running this Holda. Brazilians are coming, and everything's starting to kind of come together. Where was the story going?
Oh yes, sorry about that. Yeah,
That's
so
all right.
getting back.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so here I am leading this roda, and other Brazilians are coming around, and I am scared. I am nervous. I've never been so nervous in my life. Period. I start this roda, and I'm thinking, there's Messi's in here to save me. There aren't any Brazilian peers I have to save me. I've got to do this, right? So I have this roda, and it goes amazingly. We have a great roda, and even the capoeiristas that came there, they all want to play. They can tell that I'm injured, but they're sitting there. They're playing in the bateria. We're having a great time, and it took me a year to realize that was the best lesson Messi has ever taught me. In that one moment, he empowered me more than I've ever been empowered in my life. He showed me, he was showing me that you're not a Canadian capoeirista in Brazil. You're a capoeirista in Brazil. And I trust you. I trust you with this art. I trust you with this team. You've got this.
Nice.
Now, would I want to hear that how I sounded at that Hava 10 years ago? No. I'm sure right now I'd be very critical of what I sounded like. But he trusted me in a way that I realize I have to do the same. I have to pass that on. I've got to pass that lesson forward, and I think that's very, very important.
Yeah. For
How
sure.
do we find a way to empower our students so that they feel that we trust them, holding on to this art that we hold so dear?
And a little, and some of that comes to, on when you talk about passing those lessons on. Like, I think, rather empowering those students, it's about being put just like one step outside of your comfort zone, or maybe two. That would have been a pretty uncomfortable situation, I can imagine.
Yeah.
but letting people get comfortable with being uncomfortable until they get comfortable again.
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
and experiencing that moment of like nerves racked, and you're like, this isn't my normal thing, right? And usually I can kind of just hide in the shadows or hide in the shadow of the senior students a little bit and jump in. But yeah, we need to do that on a regular basis. Like you said, it's empowering. It allows for that growth on that individual. And if they fail, that's fine, right?
Yep.
let them a chance to kind of recoup and figure it out, take some time to kind of, you know, run it through their head and understand the situation and support them and say, look, it's all right that you failed, you know, just try again.
Yep.
That's the
I
most
mean, it's
important thing, right?
ironically, it's the analogy of a hada, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
at the end of the day, we don't see hadas with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. We see hada with 2, and everyone's going to have that time to go into a hada. It doesn't matter. Doesn't mean you're going into every hada, but if you're a capoeirista, you will be in a hada. So at some
Absolutely.
point, you're going to be empowered with whatever game you bring into that hada, whether you're 3 days in, 3 decades in, it doesn't matter. At that moment, you're the one who is one of the driving forces of the hada. You can't sit on the sidelines, right?
No.
Which
Yeah.
I think is really important.
And those moments never those moments never go away of stepping out of that comfort zone. Like, you know, you know, for someone who's a beginner, stepping into the hada for the first time is super nerve-wracking, especially someone who's not comfortable being in front of other people, right? And they have to play, you know, they're surrounded by a circle of 20, 30, 40 other people, and they're in there in the middle with somebody else. Guess what?
Yep.
You know, you're going in. Sometimes you get pushed in, right? You know, it's like, get in there.
We've all got that.
You need to go. Stop standing on the sidelines. Get in, right? You know,
Yep.
you know, but that moment never changes. Even though as we grow in Capoeira and get used to stepping into the hada, that same moment will happen when you're in the bateria. The first time you sit in the bateria with one of the instruments, whether you lead a song or not, it's completely different. There's that moment, right? And then there's the moment where you lead a song. And then there's moments where, you know, say you're awarded, you know, a higher chord. And it puts you into a hada with people who have that higher chord and who've had it for a number of years, right? And the responsibility. It's always, you're constantly being put slightly out of your comfort zone, one way or another, right? And the more we do it, the more we get comfortable with that, which is strange, you know.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's actually
right.
I know, right? But it is actually the thing why I think some people quit, right? Because that pressure never stops, right? I think we've all heard it, where a student has said, you know what, I don't want to get my next koda. And my next question is always, do you believe the pressure is going to stop building because you haven't got your next koda? Because it doesn't.
It doesn't change.
It doesn't matter what it is. Our jobs as teachers are to constantly keep that ground a little slippery.
Yeah.
We'll show you how to stand on that ground, and then once you've got that, we make it slippery again. And you have to, right? Now, years later, Mesri still makes the ground under me slippery. I have to make the ground slippery under my students. My students make the ground slippery under their teammates. We've gotta constantly be trying to. If I'm playing you in a hada, I know you're making the ground slippery under me because you're going to challenge me. Like, that's how it should be. The art isn't about feeling comfortable, sitting in a chair, and going, now I'm a capoeirista. It's the opposite.
It never ends.
It's a chair on. It never ends. It never ends. It really
ends.
never ends.
Yeah.
And I get how that can sometimes be frustrating. And I've always understood why people walk away from the art, because they say, yeah, I'm not really in the mood anymore to be challenged to that degree. Not a problem at all. But when you decide to keep, keeping the analogy, those 2 feet in the hada, understand a kick's coming. Understand an esquiva needs to happen. Understand that ground's going to be slippery under you for your entire career in the art.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Listen, I don't want to hold up you much more of your time, but I'm going to give you, let's take this opportunity for a shameless plug about your academy, what you guys are up to these days during COVID. And so take it away.
Cool. Again, my name is Professor Saci, Capoeira Camará here in Toronto. If you want to look for our website, www.capoeira.to, it'll have all the information in terms of our classes. We're located right now at 35 Golden Avenue. Currently, in this pandemic, we are doing online classes. And through those online classes, again, it is a paid online class, not free. But we have our online classes Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays for all levels at this point. At some point, we may, based on terms of how the pandemic is working, we may start to segregate one of the classes or a different class for strict beginners who are brand new to the art. I've been a little hesitant with that. I purposely haven't been bringing in new students in the last probably years, because I think that the art to understand it to begin with, you need to be walking into the class. You need to breathe the same air. So until we can safely breathe the same air, we've kind of had that on hold. But for now, we've been doing the online classes. So if anyone has any questions for myself, text, email, online, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Feel free to send me a message. Whether it be about my class, whether it be about classes in general, whether it be about capoeira in general, I really like to meet and connect with new people. I think that's really and truly, from my perspective, capoeira isn't about the kicks, isn't about the music, isn't about everything. It's about the connection. It's always been just a portal for connection. So this online world that we're in now has just added one more ability to connect. So feel free to connect to me with me online, and I'll do my best to try to share whatever I know about the art and hopefully learn from you as well.
Awesome. Então, valeu, professor, por seu tempo.
De nada, meu.
Very, very awesome that you could be a part of this, and hopefully this helps us all out.
Cool. It will, man. Again, thank you again for running this, man. It's we need more people like you. Again, it's a very philanthropic act that you're actually doing, getting the word out, and the more that we can do this, the better, right? It's not for everybody, but for whom it's for, we really want to make sure they understand what's out there for them. So again, thank you again on behalf of myself and everyone in Capoeira.